Hi guys, it's GM Life Coach. So yeah, it's part 2 because the last time we got drowned out. So we're in a different common this time. Yeah, we're not in the same one with all that music and shenanigans. How you doing this week? You alright?
I am very good, Gavin, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm alright, man. I'm just, I'm mellow. It's been an alright week. So it's only Monday, but
Happy Monday, people.
Yeah,
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. It can go downhill from here, but
No, it's not. We're podding.
sorry.
It's gonna be great.
All right. So we spoke last time. We was in the pod. We spoke about your son getting accepted into school.
That process.
Yeah, and all that process. So let's go from there. Let's
get back into it. Okay, cool. Right. So what I was saying before was that the process for secondary transfers looks a certain way. So if you think about the choices that we have as parents, we have to make the best decisions for our children and their needs. And so if you have a child with additional needs, you have to consider the placement being the right place for them, because ultimately they have additional needs, and education doesn't need to be, another stress and worry on top of those things. So at this point, I was given the opportunity to choose 3 schools for my son. People that have children with additional needs that have an EHCP will know, if they're of that age group, that they are not given 5 choices, they're given 3 choices. And so I chose my top 3 schools. The first school that I put down as my ideal school for my son is the school that he's currently attending now. So we're going to call that school A. And then I chose school B and school C. And basically, the local authority have an obligation to find a way to put, my child into school A. That's just how it should work, really.
Yeah.
What my local authority did was they didn't consider any of those schools that I'd chosen, and instead they introduced a different setting. And this setting, let's call this school Z, for example, or X or whatever. And they went around me and put this school on my son's EHCP. They did not consult me. They just did it behind my back. And then they contacted me on the phone. They called me on an unknown, a private number. So I wouldn't be able to record the call or even have evidence of the call log.
That's bad, man.
Very much so. And so basically they contacted me, told me what they'd done. And when I naturally objected to it, they said, well, there's nothing you can do. It's been done. Now, the EHCP is a legal document. And so it's a health document. And so I was like, well, no, I'll take you to court. I'm going to take you to court. And the person I spoke to, this lady, she literally scoffed me off the phone. Her response was, yeah, okay, well, good luck with that. So I was like, no problem.
Rude, man.
So that's how my journey with, kind of battling with my local authority came to be. I must say at this point, my son is attending, as I said, that school that was my first choice. So, you can kind of tell that, it went well for me. But ultimately what happened is that I ended up having to take my son out of mainstream school for a period of time. I started to homeschool him. And all of this is simultaneously being done with me, taking my local authority to court. So at this point, we've gone through this, we're going through this tribunal service thing.
Yeah.
And I had spoke to, I'm not even exaggerating when I say this, I spoke to, I think it was either 62 or 63 different law firms or, practices about handling my case. And all of them said I had a good case. And when they asked me about payment, I said I would need to apply for legal aid. I'm I'm not able to afford their normal rates. And they all said, no.
Just took you down.
Yeah, not even. They just said, no, we can't accept you, basically. So what happened is I had to represent myself, which was a nightmare. I am not a lawyer. So, this was it. Literally, my mental health was in the toilet for consistently for 2 straight years. Literally, it was a nightmare. But research was really key in me being able to win the case. And ultimately, numbers don't lie. So, I had to do so much research to support why the judge should rule in my favor and go against the local authority. And so, a lot of parents with kids in, these kinds of situations don't realize how much power they have when it comes to the legal system, because, the local authority is the local authority. So they use fear, they try to intimidate you. They intimidated me, they threatened me, they withheld resources and funding from my son.
What did they say? What did they do?
So, okay, when I took, basically, my son he's a child that is inside of the Richmond Borough, and the Richmond Borough have an obligation or a duty of care to make sure that my child's needs are being met, and they just refuse to help. They still, to an extent, are refusing to help, but I'm getting more support from his school, which is not in the borough. That's one of the reasons that they didn't want me to send him to that school. So it's not the worst case scenario at this point. But ultimately, they stopped helping. And so they withdrew him from all of the services, speech and language therapy, physiotherapy, all the therapies, basically.
So when they were threatening, it was more like they were just rescinding all their services.
Yeah, they were making it impossible for me to get or receive any support for my child. And when you go through the appeals process, when you're challenging a local authority's decision on something, they have what they consider to be impartial outsiders that are supposed to help you or guide you into how to basically appeal against the local authority, which is obviously the government. So, on that level. So basically, the place that I was sent to for support is a place called Sendias, and it was a nightmare. I was met with racism there. So I was explaining the case to one of the people, and this is an independent, and I say air quotes when I say independent, organization that is supposed to be completely impartial to the local authority. But what I quickly found out is that they're very much in cahoots with the local authority, and they had no intentions of helping me. And so one of the things that came up was me explaining my case so that they would have an understanding of what I was dealing with and why I was appealing. And when it got to the social and racial part of the case, in terms of the experiences that both my son and I had been dealing with and were going through at the time, this lady basically was like, well, why are you living there if, you're very lucky to even be living there?
What?
Why are you living there if it's not, what did she say? I can't remember the exact words she used, but it was basically judgmental, and I should be lucky as a black person to be living in this place.
That's rude.
Right. It's racist.
Basically, yeah.
Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The impression I got was, it was, how dare I? She was offended as a white woman to be hearing a black person explain that their experience living in this amazing place was not acceptable. And so my entitlement of, putting or placing accountability on the local authority for them to do what they're supposed to do was seen as something to be quite, taken as outrageous for this woman. This woman was offended that I was saying what I was saying. Wow. She spoke to me in a way that was very personal. And so when I'd explained, after her saying what she said, I said to her, like, it's clear you don't even realize what you're saying here. And what I will do is tell you that what you've just said is highly inappropriate. It's completely, unethical. And honestly, like, it's very, very bigoted. Like, it's crazy what you've just said. And I'm explaining my experience with you. I'm explaining my experience to you, and you're supposed to be impartial. You're supposed to be on my side, and you're supposed to advise me on how I get from A to B. And what you're doing is you're doing the exact same thing that I'm coming to you with. That, this is my experience from my local authority. My local authority is treating me like this. And I have a theory that it's because I'm a minority. I feel like I'm feeling targeted because of that. And what you're doing is telling me that I'm lucky that I live here. I shouldn't really be complaining. And, you don't understand my choices, when that's not what I'm coming to you for help with. What I'm coming to you for help with is the fact that the local authority have done something illegal and they're trying to bully me into accepting it, and you're supposed to help me hold them accountable for the fact that they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing by the law. The law says X, Y, and Z, and they've not done that. So you're supposed to help me hold them accountable and get the result that I need, the right decision.
So did you get any allies while you found any allies while you were doing this? Or you represented yourself in your process? No. So basically, without saying too much, because there were two allies. One of them was within the local authority, and one of them was within the school placement that they initially wanted my son to go to, which that school was abysmal. It was not a good fit. It was never going to be somewhere that I would have ever considered sending my son. And when I did research into that school, it became very clear quite quickly why they suggested that. That school was the cheapest to fund for my child to go to. So the fees for that school would have come in at around £19,000 a year. And someone within the local authority who was also an ally, she had explained it to me in the way that I didn't understand about the funding side of it at the time. I just thought, I know about catchment areas and whatever. But I didn't understand about the funding side. She had explained it to me in a way that was basically, it's cheaper for them to send him there. And, ultimately, your concerns for not wanting him to go there are right, because it's a cheaper funded school, because it's not as good of a school, ultimately. So the better the school, the more higher the fees are, which obviously makes sense. Yeah, totally.
Right. So prior to this conversation, I didn't know any of this information. So I'm finding this out. As I'm finding it out, I'm like, wow, it really all is about money. And they really do try to, pigeonhole certain people and put them into these boxes that are not viable for them. They're unhealthy and whatever. This is not the role they're supposed to take. Is about looking after the genuine well-being of the child. Especially if your child has additional needs. If you as a parent say, I have these concerns, boom, 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 and they're not meeting those concerns, or at least exploring them and doing everything in their power to get you and your child, your family, the most support for the circumstances, then they're not doing the right job. And so, what happens a lot of the time is that if they don't think you know any better, or you don't present on paper in a certain way, for example, you're not, this, a certain type of profession, or you're not in a certain tax bracket, then you're seen as an easy target for these types of things to happen. And so, that's what was happening. I was ticking certain boxes for them. I'm a single parent. I have additional needs myself. I'm a person of color. I'm living in an isolated area because there's not a big, they were profiling me, right, in many different ways. And the experience I was getting was the same. I was getting, you know, conversations on the telephone that were hostile, literally, like people almost shouting at me. I had, like, you know, a lack of correspondence via, say, email and written correspondence because they didn't want to have a paper trail that I could then use to take, you know, to court. And so there was all of these really insidious practices happening. There were manipulations. There was, oh no, this wasn't said. Oh no, they didn't mean that. Oh no, that can't have happened. And all of this stuff that was honestly making me feel like, am I going crazy? Like, I can't, this is insane. This is madness. Like, and you know, then speaking to other people, literally I was getting nowhere at a certain point. So Sendias, I made a complaint. I obviously was not going to trust anything that they were going to give me, so I wasn't able to get any support from them at all. So at that point I had no support from anywhere, from anyone, and like I was just desperate to kind of gather information, intel, whatever you want to, you know, call it. So at a point there's an app, a social media app called Nextdoor, which is like a local community app. I just wrote a post on there and was like, you know, hi, you know, people, community, whatever. My name is so-and-so. This is my experience with my local authority. You know, has anybody else had any, you know, dealings with them or experiences like this? If so, can you please, you know, forward any information or support services or organizations, charities that might be able to help, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, my throat is a bit harsh today. But yeah, like I was inundated with about 30 to 40 messages in the first 2 days. All of the people I'd spoken to were women. All of the people I'd spoken to were single parents. And all of the people that I'd spoken to had children with disabilities. And instantly it occurred to me, wow, there's something really like messed up happening here. We are being targeted because of, as you said, being profiled. So if you're being profiled by a local authority and you're being treated in that way, it's having a knock-on effect on, you know, your child or your kids, your family life, your social life, your financial life. Like even to get information, you're having to speak to people that you might have to pay them for information, like lawyers or advisors or whatever. This is a really big problem. And so what happened just prior to this initial issue that I was having with my sons transitioning into secondary school was about a couple of years prior to that, it was flagged that my local authority was basically they were being investigated for not doing the right thing. And so I was contacted by an auditor and she had said to me, look, you know, your son's name has come up. He is a child that the local authority it's been proven that they've been failing him for a considerable amount of time, which was over a year. And
at this point, how old was your son?
At this point, when I first heard about the audit, he was in year 5, year 6. So he was like 9, 10, 8, maybe 9 or 10. And so basically that all happened, and that ended up being where the local authority had to pay us compensation. Now, I know that the local authority never gives money to anybody unless they are really in the wrong. And there's like, you know, and so my initial thought was that I didn't even want to accept the money because what they had offered me was nothing, really, if I'm being honest. It was nothing. They offered me £1,200, and initially for probably about a year and a half, I didn't accept the money. And that was another tactic that I guess they tried to use where it concerned, you know, me taking their stuff, you know, like just accepting, being bullied, basically. They were trying to bully me, you know, and because I didn't accept it. Bear in mind, we're in the pandemic at this time as well. So that's happening. There's just a lot of things happening. And it got to a point where I didn't take the money. So what I did was I started a complaint with the local authority, and you have stages. And so I got all the way to like a stage 1 complaint, which is like the most serious type of complaint that they
and when you say, sorry, but go back to, when you say they was offering you money, how much did they offer you?
The compensation that they offered me was £1,200. So
Wow.
I didn't want to accept it because I didn't understand how they got to that number and who made that decision. And I wanted answers from them, and they refused to give me the answers. So I wanted to know who was responsible for failing, just how, let's say how deep the rabbit hole went.
Yeah.
No one wanted to give me answers. I was asking all the right questions, and people were actively evading answering the questions.
Yeah.
I spoke to one person who I don't even believe that they really understood what they were doing by giving me information. I really don't think that they did. But what I do know is after this person, I'd explained the situation to them, and I said, look, I just want answers. I'm entitled to that. Like, no one is giving me any answers. So she did her best. She got me some answers, and she helped me formulate this stage 1 complaint in a way that they wouldn't be able to ignore it. They would have to deal with it. As soon as she did that, it escalated the situation. I started to get correspondence from these people, and what I was getting was flattery and, compliments and nice, polite conversation, and we're here to help and we want to support you in any way that we can, and blah, 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 blah. A lot of smoke was being blown where the sun doesn't shine, basically. But what I realized is when I tried to get in contact with the lady that initially helped me, she was gone. She was disappeared. They made her disappear. I don't know how, I don't know what, but she was not working there anymore. And I have a very strong feeling that it was because she helped me, which is why she's no longer there.
So what happened next?
So when I spoke to this woman who was basically like the head, she works just underneath the head of the whole organization. I'd said to her, look, I'd spoken to this person, and she goes, oh, yeah, she's very helpful, that one. I said, oh, she was amazing. She really helped me do this and she helped me do that and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's great. I mean, yeah, she's super helpful, isn't she? But she did not mean it. It was the most disingenuous thing I'd ever heard. Like, she clearly didn't like it. She didn't like that I had information that I don't think I was supposed to have. And she didn't like that I now had, let's say, an arsenal to fight them. The lady was giving me missing pieces of the puzzle. She was saying to me, look, if this is what your experience has been, and now you're going through this with the schooling, you don't have to accept that. You can do this, you can do that. And I was like, oh, okay. So she was helping me. That is literally, she was helping the other side. So I think maybe they saw that as a level of disloyalty to her or something, or on her part. And, she was gone. I left emails for her. They were, bounced back. So I don't even think she was working there anymore. Like, she was not I called around different teams to speak to her or see if someone knew. And then eventually I found out, she's not working here anymore. And I was like, oh. So for all I know, I might well have very well got this woman fired, unintentionally, just because she was helping me. But
no doubt she's a beacon in it. So
right, and so I thought, well, these people must be really unhappy with her, and I got that from them. That's the impression I got, was that they didn't like that she had, even though what she told me was the law, it was the right thing to do. I was calling for help, and she helped me. That was her job. But when you're dealing with corruption, especially in a government level, local authority, taxpayers, civil servants, whatever, taxpayers' money is being, our money is being spent on these services, and these people are corrupted. So in the same way that they were found guilty of, failing all these children that had disabilities, they were also manipulating what children got to go to what schools because of money. And so if you were seen as a child that was coming from a certain background or, you know, social economical disadvantage, or, you know, you're a part of a minority group of some kind, and then you think, you know, people don't even realize that people with disabilities are a minority group, like, and they need more support, but they're given a lot less. The government is constantly, you know, wiping funding or pulling funding for things. Right. It's almost like everyone I know that has like certain disabilities and stuff, there's something that they all share in common, and it's that they feel like they are being punished because they have a disability. I've heard so many people say that, you know, it's like feeling like you're being punished because you're a woman, or being punished because you're black, or being punished because, you know, whatever your minority, you know, group is at that time. And the reality is that that is how society treats people. They find ways to create these spaces of insecurity, and they do not do what they're supposed to do for the most part. And you see it all the time. You know, you're constantly hearing about it in the news. This is why
people are striking, isn't it? So,
right,
you know.
Exactly. How can we have people striking? You've got nurses that are paying, you know, they're getting paid 10 quid an hour some places, you know, healthcare workers and stuff. But they're living in London. London is not a city that you can work in for £10 an hour and survive. Like, I don't care what you do. You could be a cleaner, you could be a teacher, you could be, you know, a mechanic. Like, if you live in London, you cannot be paid that type of hourly rate, and it be expected to, but you're dealing with people's lives. For me, it always, you know, it always kind of was fascinating to me that we can sit down and look at, you know, let's say, I don't know, footballers that are being signed for how much money a week, millions of pounds, like, you know, and then you can't pay the people that keep society alive a decent wage.
Well, what we're gonna do, we're gonna look on that, because that'll be another kind of worms we'll be opening up. We'll be there like for another 2 hours. Right. So, okay, so what support does your son get now?
So he gets all of the support. The school that he's in now, it has, the reason that they didn't want me to send him there is because the school, if you remember, I said that the school they wanted to send him to, the fees of like 19 grand a year. Yeah. The school that he's in now, the fees are 49 grand a year. They pay for that. That's why they didn't want to send him, ultimately. Like, you can clearly see there's a big difference between 19 and 49,000 pounds a year. The reason that those fees are as high as they are is because his school has on-site specialists. They have speech and language therapists there. They have physiotherapists there. You know, they have emotional, like, guidance and counselors there, like child psychologists. They have a whole team of people that work and are based in the school. So another reason why these poorly funded, terrible placements like the £19,000 a year school are, let's say, attractive for the local authority to send children that they just don't really care for in that way to those places. The reason is because those schools get to put down things like, we have to pay for specialists to come in. And when you think about the fees that these specialists, if you pay an outsider to come in, you're going to end up paying a lot more anyway. That was part of the argument that I used to say, well, you know, overall, you're going to end up spending X amount of money potentially on my child anyway, because he needs these things. And so if you're paying people who are outside to come inside, you know, it all adds up, basically. And so when I made that point to the judge, she was like, well, yeah, actually, what you're saying makes sense. So she asked the local authority, how much, you know, does it cost the school to bring in these specialists every year? And then they quoted a certain number, and the number was very high. And then I didn't say this at the time, but I remember thinking at the time, this seems like fraud. I feel like, you know, like, there are certain scams that happen where, you know, the perception is one thing, but the reality is something else. That's kind of how I felt. I was like, oh, okay. So this is exactly what the local authority was doing, which is why they got audited in the first place. But if I wasn't living in Richmond, and the person, they basically did it to the wrong person. One kid that it happened to, their dad was like, I think a lawyer or a barrister of some kind, but worked in the city. He had some pull and he ordered this investigation. So the investigation happened, and what it, ultimately exposed was that there was a pattern of behavior, and it wasn't just an isolated incident. It was an ongoing thing that the local authority had been complicit in. And it wasn't one person. It was a whole team of upper management. And so now when I look back at that same team, none of them are working there. What's happened to them is they've all been moved to places like Lambeth, Wandsworth. They've been moved to places where these things are probably less likely to be flagged. So, which is ironic. So
that's why we can't get nothing in our boroughs,
right,
in our local boroughs.
You see the first pod that we were talking about, like you asked me the question, why do I think certain things are the way that they are? And I said it's systemic. That's what I'm talking about. That is a systemic, strategic movement. They have not gotten rid of people that were doing the wrong thing. They've moved them to places where they're less likely to be questioned. Do you get what I mean? So that's the problem. And so, like that ultimately is how and why my son ended up getting into the school that he's in now, which is great, by the way. Like, he loves it. He's thriving there. He's doing really well. But as a result of it, I have had continued lack of support. In fact, no support. From the moment I took my son out of education in my local area, they've offered no support. They don't attend any of his annual reviews. They don't even answer when they're invited by the school, or they come back and say, we're not coming. And so there are only transition years that they are required to by law. So next year is going to be a transition year for my son, and I'm going to see what happens, because if they don't attend that one,
to go in year 9.
He's going into year 9 this year, but when he goes into year 10, that's the transition year going, obviously like Key Stage 4, and he'll be doing his GCSEs. So if they don't attend for that, at that point, I will look to take them to court again, because they are legally obliged to attend. But a lot of all of this stuff is just researching what their role is and what they're supposed to be doing. If you don't understand it, you have to find a way to, find someone that can break it down to you and make it make sense to you. Because it is a lot of jargon. And that, again, that's another thing that is used as a defense tool for them not doing what they need to do. So, what better way than to put all these big fancy words that the average person doesn't really understand or can't readily identify with. It's not a part of their day-to-day is not a part of their day-to-day vocabulary. So if you're using certain words, that it's basically like speaking another language. But if you can take whatever the literature is to someone who maybe does understand the language and say, look, can you please decode this for me or break it down to me in layman's terms in a way that I understand, then you start to realize it's really not that difficult to understand. There is a duty of care. They're legally obliged to provide that duty of care. And if they're not, and in fact their actions are leading to harm, then they have to be held accountable, and you have the power. You have the power to do that and hold them to account. And so, it's sad how many people feel hopeless and, powerless. And I felt like that for years. But now they don't scare me. I don't care anymore, because I did it. I did the right thing. I followed my gut, and by the grace of God, I won the case. But it was really kind of like really soul deprivating for a period of time, and it took its toll on my family. And so if I can help anyone understand or point them in the right direction with these things, then I'm happy to do that, because I was completely alone in this, and it literally I feel like it stole my mental health from me, like in a very big way. I was falling asleep with like stacks and piles of paperwork every night, I wasn't really affecting my sleep. And then obviously I'm trying to homeschool my son at the same time. You know, I'm trying to give him what he needs. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm doing the job of a teacher and a lawyer at this point at the same time. So, but you know, I did it. And anyone that thinks that they can't do it, like...
So was that around the time when you met me?
Yeah, if you remember, that's one of the reasons I enrolled Zakiyaa into
Together We're Stronger.
Yeah, like into your organization, because I wanted him to have a wide, you know, curriculum. And one of the things I was really happy about in terms of homeschooling him was that I got to decide what to teach him. And, you know, I wanted him to be in a space where he was able to learn about his own, you know, heritage and where his culture, people are coming from culturally and even just geographically. Like, I really appreciated the, you know, content that you guys were putting out and the therapeutic side to what you guys were doing as well. I thought that was really important, you know, and I wanted to expose him to that. So yeah, like that was one of the main reasons. My sister heard about what you was doing. You obviously, you know my sister, and she referred me to you. And so once I saw what you was about, I was like, yeah, I'm enrolling him. I don't know how to, you know, whatever it is I need to do, I'm going to do that, because this is, you know, this is good. But, you know, a lot of people don't have that same kind of, you know, knowledge. They don't know that these things are even out there. So it's so important.
Yeah.
You know.
So guys, all right. So if you want any like advice, or you want to speak to Zay, even, like, you know, you can email the podcast, GM the Life Coach podcast at gmail.com. So that again, the GM the Life Coach podcast at gmail.com. Email in and let's hear your thoughts. If you've been through something similar, if you had to tackle the local government, if you've had to tackle a school or wherever it is, get in touch or write in the comments, and we'll get back to you, and, you know, and have you on the show. You can talk about how, you know, what you had to go through, and, you know, maybe we can help other people who need that information as well. So listen, Zay, thanks so much, man. Thank you so much.
We got to
do part 2 finally.
Yeah.
Finally to go a week, but we're here. So thank you guys. This is GM Life Coach Podcast. Remember, you can catch us on YouTube, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you get your podcasts, we are there. And look out for some more audio podcasts from our other co-host, Lucy. And that's coming up soon, or it would be already out by the time you listen to this, actually. So guys, listen, thank you so much for your support. You want to say anything, Zay?
No, just like, yeah. Oh, yes. Thank you for having me again. And like, honestly, you know, showing and taking interest in my story, I guess. And I just really want to, you know, shed light on certain issues. And I really want people to just not feel alone in what they're dealing with. I think so many people have had a hard time, especially, you know, post-pandemic or during the pandemic and post-pandemic times, that, you know, I love, again, what you're doing. And I just, I'm really grateful for the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to, you know, any future content that we create.
Listen, man, we've got some good stuff coming up, so it's
gonna be happening.
Yeah, it's gonna be popping up.
We're gonna be getting it right.
So guys, just share, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you soon. All right. Anyway, guys, Jim Life Coach, and I'm out.